When your faith is beginning to sag, be careful not to prop it up with a humble brag. There was a man who enjoyed prayer meetings at his church. He enjoyed not only to pray in front of others, but he enjoyed telling others through his prayers of just how spiritual he was. He stood on this one evening of the prayer team, or the prayer group that assembled, and he stood before them with this prayer, with most heads bowed and most eyes were shut. And he said, "O Lord God, I thank you that you have made me not like other people. I want to thank you that you have been with me all of my life. With all the talent you gave me, I could have been famous, but I chose to walk humbly with you. I turned down a 6-figure salary just for you so that I could serve this small church. Several have even told me that I am their role model, and yet I simply walk humbly in your favor." There was an awkward silence. There were a few amens until this one sweet dear lady turned to her friend and said, "God bless his soul. He is so trying to be humble, he's forgetting to actually be humble." When your faith is beginning to sag, be careful not to prop it up with a humble brag. If there is anybody that could brag about their faith, I think St. Paul would be a good candidate, wouldn't you? I mean, look at that man. Half of the New Testament, if not more, the letters that were written were by his pen. That's something worthy to brag about, and there's countless churches that are named St. Paul. So there's a lot of reason why this particular person up there in heaven somewhere could have a prayer that sounds a little bit like that man at the prayer team. But yet, we find something quite different, don't we, when we really get in touch with what he is praying and what he is writing. St. Paul, I think, really shows his character, his faith, in his letter to Philemon. Philemon, a dear brother of his, that it must have been an interesting relationship. And I want to tell you more about that story. But before I do, I'm going to go back and give you something that will help you understand the character and what we see in St. Paul as someone who truly has a devout faith that is humble and is not bragging. Charles Stanley, you may know his name. He was the faithful Baptist preacher for 49 years at First Baptist in Atlanta, and then he became the founder somewhere along the way of In Touch Ministries. He died, I think, in 2023. God rest his soul. Very faithful to the course. And he talked about the spiritual gift of exhortation, not to be confused with the sin of extortion. It's the virtue, it's the spiritual gift to which you are able to influence in a positive way that has great wisdom for someone to appeal to the nature of your message. And Charles Stanley believed that St. Paul had and held that in his faithful journey, that he was good at being someone who exhorted others. And some of you in this room, I can tell you, I've known you long enough, you're really good at this. It's because you come across as someone non-threatening. You come across as someone that is earnestly trying to make a brother or sister in the conversation, appealing to their reason, appealing to their faith, that they will make a good and wise decision going forward. It's a spiritual gift, says Charles Stanley. We see this laid out explicitly with the letter that Paul is writing to Philemon. He knew Philemon through his previous trade when he was Roman, when he was someone who persecuted Christians. Paul was a tent maker. Tent makers, I'm going to just go out on a limb and equivalent them to a modern day car dealer. Someone who owns a car dealership, okay, the Dimmitts maybe, I don't know, someone like that. You're finding that that is where he was in his career. He had amassed a great deal of wealth. He knew Philemon through his trade. Philemon, which was not something that was unusual in their day, they had slaves. Philemon had a slave whose name was Onesimus. And Onesimus was the property of Philemon. And Paul was quite aware of the economics and the relationship of masters and slaves. And he's going to use that in his letter. This is the part of his exhortation to his friend Philemon. What happens that necessitates this letter, you may be asking, is of quite interest, because Onesimus runs away. At least that's what it appears to be to Philemon, who is hunting him down and trying to get him to return back to where he belongs. Where was Onesimus? He was in Rome. He was with a dear friend who was imprisoned by the Romans because this friend of his proclaimed that there was a different king in the world whose name was Jesus. And his friend's name was Paul. Onesimus ran away from Philemon, friend of Paul, to be of assistance to Paul. Paul couldn't leave his home. He was under house arrest. Philemon probably went and got groceries. He probably helped him around. He did everything, and you know he helped him because Paul, in the letter to Philemon, says, he was such a help to me. And I want you to see him as I do, a brother. And I want you to receive him back. And in some implicit way, he's saying, I know how this may appear. It may appear that he ran away as a slave. But look at what he did. He came to my aid. Isn't that what you would have done? Paul, in his wisdom, is going to go further and just totally, it's not sugarcoating. It's going to the virtues of this person, Philemon, and saying, you are a brother. You are one that now shares the faith that now belongs to both of us. He is really appealing to his better senses to do something that was extraordinary, to forgive a slave that left the household. Slavery's been around forever. It's not just the ownership of this country. It's been around for ancient times. And here Paul recognizes it. And at the very end, what does he say? He says that he himself, Paul, is a slave to Christ. Now that's not a humble brag. That is him positioning his faith where it belongs and where we should position our faith as well. The gospel is a really challenging text because the words that Jesus says for you to be a disciple is nearly impossible for us to get it from our heads to our hearts. You are to forsake your mother and father. You're to basically rebuke and go against your brothers and sisters. And then he goes into a bit of parable. If you're going to build a tower, wouldn't you plan out what it takes to build it and the costs associated? If you're going to be an army going against a king that's got 20,000 and you got 10,000, wouldn't you reconsider that strategy? I mean, and then he says you must bear your cross. And finally, as if it wasn't hard enough or impossible, he then says you must give up all your possessions. Dearly beloved, how many of us hear that message from Jesus and say, oh yes, I am ready to follow you? So what is Jesus saying to us in this? He's speaking definitely to some people, some disciples of his that are going to be challenged. Their mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters are going to say, you are throwing your life away following this man Jesus. Are you nuts? He's been crucified. Are you going to carry that cross? To which at that time the disciples probably, now post-resurrection, said, well, we saw him risen, we touched his wounds, we know, we don't need any more proof. But before that resurrection event, before the crucifixion, they were confronted with a tough decision. Hearing these words of Jesus saying, these are the things that you will encounter to be my disciple. So Jesus knew what was coming. He knew all along. And he wondered if they would have the faith to be able to weather it. Or would they just seek the counsel of the wicked and go about saying, oh, how bold and faithful they were, but they leave the cross. They run away from the faith. They could have done that. And in fact, between the time of his trial and the time of his crucifixion and the time of being hung to death, where were the disciples? Only one was at the foot of the cross, and all the rest, they were hiding. They hid even up until the moment of the resurrection. So furthermore, Jesus is looking at these disciples, and he is saying, you better calculate the cost of my discipleship. Jesus isn't making a humble brag here. He's using the words of exhortation to let them know that they do have it within them to overcome these challenges. He's trying to encourage them. He's not trying to make them feel dismayed or that they can't make this happen. He's really trying to do his best without coming across saying, I'm going to the place of heaven where there's a strong tower, and I've calculated the cost and what it takes to build it and who I need to be in it. I know the so-called king of this world, the Satan, and he might have 20,000, but I got a lot more than him with all my angels and archangels, and I'm going to destroy him and put him at my feet. Jesus could have done that. But instead, he turned it towards them in the parable, and he really wanted them to fathom and consider their faith. He's saying the same thing to us. He knows what's ahead of us. He knows what we will be challenged with. Just like it was for Paul, who would be tortured and martyred. Just like it was for Peter, all the apostles, thousands and thousands and thousands of people that followed Jesus just like us. He's already calculated the cost for us. He already knows what seems insurmountable and the odds. Whether it's your health, whether it's your family, whether it's your income, whatever that may be. But sometimes we swallow the shallow pill of our pride and we say to others, look at how good and faithful I am. That's why I'm extremely careful. And although it sometimes slips out of my mouth sometimes, I did this and I did that and I need a plaque and I need this. Boy, oh boy, I feel like I'm that man in that prayer group working so hard to be humble, not actually being humble. We don't need to go around telling people about our humility. It's either there or it's not there. And Jesus knows that. So why are we doing it? Who are we proving it to? What are we actually calculating in all of these things that we say to others about our faith? What a great Christian I am. Look at how much I gave, and look at what I built, and look how I've done. That's not for Christ. That's for you. And this is what Jesus is saying to his disciples. You've got to carry your cross. You've got to give up those things. You don't give up your service. You become a slave to the Almighty. Jesus doesn't need to brag or boast about what he's done. He's God. And God is the ultimate moral authority of all creation. He had every right to come in hard and fast and put it upon the people. And what did he do? He came in as a lamb. The most unsuspecting creature, the one of most humility, to where we, over countless centuries, have to discern ourselves. Is this truly the Son of God? So consider that, the cost of discipleship, of carrying your cross, so that when there are times when you feel that your faith is beginning to sag, please, dearly beloved, be careful and do not result to giving a humble brag. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.